Sometimes a painting isn't about drama or detail, it's about stillness. This scene caught my eye for its simplicity: open space, distant hills, and a few poles and wires cutting across the sky. In this demo, I'll walk through how I approach a watercolor like this, using soft washes, restrained color, and letting the paper do some of the work. Let's see how it goes. This is the late afternoon photo I took. Nice fog rolling through and that golden hour light. The first thing I like to do is make a charcoal sketch based on the reference photo, and that's what I did. I thought the sketch turned out all right, but I think I could do better, so I brought it into Photoshop to make some compositional changes. I changed out the asphalt road for a dirt one. I think having the road head off in 3 directions gives the viewer a way to get in and out of the painting. It also leads you right to that big telephone pole on the right side, kind of anchoring things down, connecting to the sky as well. I moved that yield sign to the left to separate it from the other 2 signs, and added a small building in the distance against the hills back there, just as a place for the eye to go in the distance. I start the whole process by penciling in the large shapes on this piece of 20 by 14, 140-pound watercolor paper. I began by wetting the areas of the sky. The sky is more about the fog on the right-hand side, the white of the paper that I'll be leaving, not so much the clouds or the blue or intensity of the other parts of the sky. Now I'm going to use some cerulean blue to put in blue sky on the right-hand side. That'll be the most intense part of the sky, and as I move to the right, it's going to slowly dissolve into paper white. I really want that bright sunlight look to the right-hand side, sunlight and fog mix. I put in a little raw sienna to add some color contrast to the sky. I also pulled some of that raw sienna and cerulean blue mixture down into the hills too, just to blend that together. To start painting the distant hill, I took Cobalt Blue and mixed it with some Ultramarine Blue. It's going to be a fairly intense hill there. I really want that to contrast with the white of those signs. The signs are facing away, so it's a metal, basically they're metal panels reflecting the sunlight. And I just like that contrast there. So I'm going pretty dark for the hills on the right-hand side. I add a little bit of burnt sienna there too, and now I'm cutting around these signs. Again, these signs are paper white with that dark wood post painted in afterwards. I do decide later to come back and glaze over this again with another wash of blue. I wanted to sort of even it out. It's a little mottled looking, and I wanted to shape the hill a little bit more with a harder line. This is pretty soft because I decided to paint this in fairly soon after doing the sky, so that border with the sky is pretty soft. I'm adding in more of that raw sienna to that side there, and then tilting the board to get things to move and flow. I'm going to use some raw sienna and yellow ochre to start working on the road, the foreground area. This will be the initial wash for that area. When I come back in later with some darks, these will be more of the highlights. After letting it dry, I come back to work on the field. The field itself will be fairly intense. I'll come back in later and wash it with some Ultramarine Blue, and that'll add some really nice, subtle green to it. There you see me shoving a kneaded eraser under the top of the board just to tilt it up just a slight bit. Here's where I take the Ultramarine Blue and wash over some of that yellow field to add some green to it. Here I'm adding a puddle of burnt sienna, Quinacridone Rust, and Ultramarine Blue. The way I like to mix my colors on the palette is different pools or different puddles and let it mingle. And then I can run the brush through it and get varied colors on the brush, which then translates to the page. These are the shadow areas of the dirt road in the foreground. I think the foreground is all about texture. Sure, it's a path. It gives you a way to get in and out and get around on the painting, but I wanted some hard edge texture here in the foreground to contrast with the softness of what's going on above the road. I'm adding in a few distant trees in the background there. Interesting shapes, but they also echo the hill, the shape of the hill. Now I'm using this needle brush with some dark paint to carefully line in the posts for the signs. Now these won't be exactly straight, they vary a little bit, but I think that's okay. It actually adds interest to the painting. If everything was perfectly straight and square and right angles, then I think it'd be kind of boring. Here I am painting in the telephone pole on the right-hand side using a 1/2-inch flat brush. I have to go and load it up a few times to get it to the top. That's okay, it adds some contrast to it. I'll come in later with some Cobalt Blue on the left-hand side to darken that, and then scrape on the right-hand side with a card to add some highlights. Now here's the most nerve-wracking part of the whole thing. I have to take this needle brush and draw one continuous line across for the wire. So I load up the needle brush with as much paint and I rehearse it a few times, and then whoosh in one motion. Now it doesn't connect all the way through, but I think that's a good thing. I don't want that to be one continuous line with no breaks. So there are a few places where it's dry brush mark or there's a slight break in it. I think that's fine. It actually works better that way. And then I'm going to add a little bit of wire noise, I call it, up in the corner, and then a few birds. Later on, I come in and redo the birds or add to them because I think they're a little bit too small. I'm using cadmium yellow pretty much straight out of the tube for these reflector strips. I want them to be bright. I'm going to use some alizarin crimson and yellow for that yield sign on the left-hand side. I'm also using some alizarin crimson for that circular reflector on the telephone pole. That way I have an echo of that red. Now I'm mixing up a puddle of Ultramarine Blue and Quinacridone Rose to work on the distant hill. I'm going to reshape it a bit and add some more definition to it. As I bring this painting to a close, I try not to overwork it. Watercolor often says the most when you leave things unsaid. The open areas, the lost edges, and the suggestion of distance are what gives this piece its sense of calm. Thanks for watching. I hope there was something here that had some value, and I'll see you on the next one.